Hi, my name's Leighton Jin. I'm the Director of Development for the American Documentary and Animation Film Festival. And we got a great one right here. We got Noelle Cook, and we're talking about The Conspiracist, which is going to be screened this year at our festival. Let me double check. The date is March 31st at 11:30. That's a great program with a lot of local ties. But The Conspiracist is it's a really fascinating film, and I'm going to let Noelle talk about it. Can you describe the film for our audience?
Sure. This film turned out to be a 4-year project in the making, and it never was supposed to be a film. It was originally an academic project, but that got derailed when academic boundaries kind of prohibited me from understanding the way I needed to understand these women with very, very different views of the world than myself. Women whose entire worldview changed during COVID and during the pandemic. Um, People who had been at one point maybe even very liberal leaning people turning
Mhm.
extremely far right. And I started looking at the women of January 6th that had been arrested for their roles in January 6th. And again, I kept an academic distance for quite a while, about a year, and studied them on paper. But at some point, I realized I was hovering too high above to fully understand, and it was too easy to lump people into predetermined categories. And so I
Mhm.
spent the next 2 years actually getting to know these women. And it turned into a documentary and it turned into a book, and both called The Conspiracists. And the documentary was completely organic as well. I was tapped to do some research for Liz about a different project she's working on. She's working on an entire series of documentaries from various countries that speak about polarization. Um, and then when she learned about my research, she decided to create a film for this one. And that's how
Now
it
we
came
talk
about.
and we talk about Liz. That's Liz Smith, director, correct?
Correct. Liz Smith, the director. She's an award-winning director,
Uh-huh.
directing the film I Am Gen Z, which also
Mhm.
gives us a glimpse into what media can do to encourage people to take on disinformation and to run with it into places that sometimes can destroy lives, as
Now
you see
you're
in
the
this film.
now you're the producer on this film, but then you're also in the film too. Can you talk about how that evolved?
Yeah, one of the women that I had been talking to for a couple of years, whose trial I had gone to for her participation in January 6th, and I'd gone to her sentencing as well. Um, for her sentencing, the court makes sure you get to DC, but they send you on your own getting home. So she asked me if I would be willing to drive one of her kids' cars back across country with her. And so I thought, why not? And Liz was coming to DC anyway. We were going to film the other woman that's also in the film, Tammy.
Mhm.
That was already pre-planned, but we weren't sure what we were doing with it yet exactly.
Right.
And then Yvonne, the other woman featured, decided to be a participant as well. And we took a cross-country road trip with Yvonne, stopped to meet Tammy and a few others along the way. All of these women who turned to conspiracies
Mhm.
predominantly in 2020 to make
Mhm.
sense of a world that they had seen as going crazy and
Right.
chaotic. And what's interesting about the film, I think, is it's easy to lump people into one pool and either call them crazy or call them, extremists.
Right.
When you start to look at the pathways that brought them where they are, and you see some
Mhm.
of the systems that have failed, and they're not just failing them, they're failing many people, but this is how these
Mhm.
people have chosen to act it out. It was really an eye-opening experience to learn um, why, to see, to feel and experience why people will take one route into what seems to be completely fairy tale land, right? How can you actually believe these? But you start to see how it brings calm and explanation to a world that it really is crumbling around them in many ways. And I think that was eye-opening for me also, dealing with people just so different from me, but also able to see some common ground, especially as middle-aged women. I think that was the tie that really kept us together as far as having things to talk about, because most of our conversations never involve politics or cultural war issues. Most of our conversations were what life was like as middle-aged women after having raised children and had those responsibilities and what was left in our own landscape. And so that was, I think, the interesting part is being able to have conversations like that with people so
Mhm.
very different than myself. yet so similar because they all look like me.
What do you think this movie gets to that maybe what we read and what's in media doesn't get to about everything that happened? Because it's, we talk about conspiracists, but it's talking about other things, about people who are maybe, I don't know if I'm using the right words, disenchanted from a system that's failing them. What were you able to see that maybe that we don't get a chance to see or experience, or what we'll find from your documentary?
Well, I think what you'll find, well, I think what you'll find in the documentary is that caricatures are not relied on here. That
Hmm.
there is a humanizing element to this because part of what I do is ethnography, and that's a great tool as a method because you're coming into a situation as an observer and not to push back, not to change minds, but to understand a different culture. And for me, this was a different culture. Um, Submersing myself into right-wing spaces online, talking to people that I knew were so completely opposite from me, and it's been a journey for myself. I mean, I didn't expect to come here. And empathy became a theme here.
Hmm.
I and the distinction between empathy and sympathy, and the understanding that you can have empathy for an individual and what they've gone through, I still believe in consequences for actions that they've taken, right? And I struggled with that for a little while, but I've reconciled it with myself, and I don't think there's really another way out, even with people who believe things that are just completely outlandish. I mean, I have lines, I have boundaries. Like
Hmm.
I won't deal with overt, just overt hatred, racism, homophobia stuff.
Hmm.
But these are I say average people because they could be people sitting next to me at a PTA meeting or in church or I see in the grocery store. They're not oddities, right?
Hmm.
They're many, many, many people who
Hmm.
believe these conspiracies. So we wouldn't, you can see them. Our government has many of them right now. Many of the
Hmm.
people that I was watching online for the last 4 years now hold a place in federal government. I would just say it's gone mainstream would be an understatement, right?
Right.
It's shaping policies now, and that's the
Hmm.
scary part. I think 4 years out, that's the scary part to me, is I know way more than I knew then that I wish I didn't. But it hasn't done a thing for the conspiracists as far as
Hmm.
changing their beliefs, watching things crumble. In fact, it's bolstered their belief system since the pardons came down because many of the conspiracies seem to come true. And
Right.
that's the problem we've got right now is that at some point along the way, going back to 2020 with the conspiracy of a stolen election, um, people saw this as a recruiting tool. And that's the biggest challenge we face as well is online social media and influencers who are willing to disregard the damage and the destruction caused by disinformation and feeding it to desperate people who are
Hmm.
looking for some comfort, and it's a method of hope for them to
Hmm.
be online seeking these answers and finding them, right? I got several texts from people that I've talked to over the years who are self-identified conspiracists asking if I was okay during the fires. And then they started to tell me the conspiracies that they believed were causing them, right? That have nothing to do with reality.
Right.
In those moments, there were a couple of them I was able to, because they trust me now, I was able to say, well, yeah, that's not really true. They didn't actually shut down the fire hydrants. They're just made to put out house fires, not entire city blocks.
Right.
A couple of them are like, oh, okay, that makes sense. So I think the message in this film is don't cut people off, right? You got to have boundaries, sure. But just
Hmm.
because someone believes something that feels outlandish as far as their spirituality goes, perhaps
Hmm.
maybe keep conversations open because there are cracks for helping people who are oftentimes disenfranchised in certain ways, kind of help them having at least one person in their life that can give them some sane information. It's proven to me over 4 years to be very helpful in several situations.
Yeah.
Just
Can you talk about the process of this? Because I think if I understood you right earlier, you said this was an academic thing, and there's certain you're going to approach it as an academic thing, but
mhm.
then you kind of felt like roll up your sleeve and get in there and become more of a documentary filmmaker. Can you talk about the differences and how it was crucial for you to really understand them, and you wrote a book off of this, how that fed into the book, and did, and was this a process that you've done before? to get
No,
this deep?
no, no. My history is I was a former stay-at-home mom from
Okay.
1992 until I got divorced in 2012, and my
Hmm.
last child went off to college in 2015, and so did I. I went back to school in 2016, and I actually graduated with a degree in anthropology in 2020, right during the middle of the pandemic. And in fact, my graduate thesis was in India. I was in India during COVID, when COVID first started, trying to shoot a short documentary film about women rideshare drivers. And
Oh.
I got sent home after 12 days. So that project died. Uh, and that's what took me to January 6th. I was living in Maryland at the time, and I was looking for a new idea. And because I was looking for something visual anthropology, I decided to go take pictures of the Stop the Steal rally because it was the only thing
Hmm.
going on at the moment. And so that's how I ended up at January 6th, photographing from a great distance away from the building, wearing a mask. And none of my photos were of any violence. I was on the east front side. It was mostly just bodies smashed up against the building. And I recognize today that the bodies were the violence. Without those bodies, there wouldn't have been the overrun that there was. But quite an experience for sure, and took me on a path I definitely never imagined. But here we are, and I think recent research has been coming out. Academics who also started studying the same stuff at the same time I did, and the reason I had to leave that part behind was it was for my master's program, and one of the subjects in the film, Tammy, after just talking to her for about 6 weeks online through text, uh, she called me and told me one of her kids had committed suicide. And at that moment, I put myself, I made myself a character,
Yeah.
basically, because I started to help her with finding some resources. And I reached out to someone connected with social justice who found a firm in Philadelphia who was going to take the case pro bono because her daughter, it was her transgender daughter,
Mm.
hung herself in a Men's County prison and had been,
Mm.
it's quite a story. It goes into more detail in the book, um,
Oh.
but that's how Tammy and I that's how I broke that academic bond and just, she needed help. And I was the
Mhm.
person she called to help because there weren't any other people who were reliable in her life. And
Oh.
that's why I say it, one person can make a difference. And I
Hmm.
think that is probably true. If you can
Hmm.
have one person who can listen sometimes and who can help direct you to resources when they're available, it can make a big difference. And that's what I found
Yeah.
with her.
I worked for few nonprofits in healthcare, and sometimes it's a struggle for people to find information. So, I mean,
Right. Especially a woman who's embedded in a community who would reject her child, right?
right.
Yeah. So
That's
that's more frequent than you think.
yeah.
It is.
It's unusual. How working on this film changed your life path, career path? Because I mean, this sounds like a really it
Yeah.
just talking to you right now, it feels like this experience was really um I can feel your passion in doing this. Is this a direction you want to start going with your degree and stuff, or where do you
Yeah.
stand with that?
Well, I think at my age, having not had an income producing job since 1992, I've always been aware there was actually no real career path for me. I was my master's was in women and gender studies before I stopped at it a year short. So I understand what that looks like for women over 50. That said, this all kind of happened organically, as many of the best things do, and
Hmm.
it taught me just incredibly valuable life lessons, as well as had an acquisitions editor approach me about writing a book, right down to Liz approaching me about doing a documentary. So I think there is an interest to understanding. I think everyone at this point in our lives have been touched by someone who has been driven by conspiracies to some degree, either this current modern, Trump cycle,
Hmm.
or going back even all the way to 9/11. America is a conspiracy riddled nation, and that is only going further and further mainstream. So I think
Hmm.
that's why The Conspiracist is an interesting film, is that Liz understood intuitively as well,
Hmm.
and she's such a good listener and a good observer that she really captured these women's voices without introducing a lot of her own narrative, right?
Hmm.
When I watch this film, I'm like, she really got it. And the music, Kim Holiday, who did the music score, is just
Oh.
amazing. He was doing parts of it along the way. Liz would send him film at the end of the day, and the next morning we'd have some new music to listen to as we drove through Nebraska, and because it was very inspiring to him as well. So they were just a great team over there. I feel
Hmm.
incredibly fortunate. If I ever have an opportunity to work with them again, I love that. I guess storytelling is my passion, and
Hmm.
since visual storytelling is actually my preference, I'd love to do more documentaries if the opportunity arose. But as
Well, sounds like you did an amazing one, and so we should let people know that you are a local person. Uh,
Yeah,
you're here in Palm
I
Springs, so you don't have to travel very far for a festival.
no, in fact, if I wasn't so lazy, I could walk. So I mean, they're literally just down the road.
Well,
So
what would you like to share with some of our filmmakers about Palm Springs that are going to come here? And some of them might have never been here before. What kind of advice or tips would you give
you're coming at the perfect time of year. The weather is amazing,
them?
and the restaurants are incredible, right?
Hmm.
And I mean, I've got my favorites, of course, but Palm Springs is just a beautiful place. It's a welcoming place. It's a
Hmm.
place where you can see it's the yard sign comes to life, right? Everyone's welcome here, and people just
Right.
walk around, and it feels pretty good. I'm very happy to be back in Riverside County. I was born in Riverside County, but in Riverside, so never
Wow.
thought I'd end up in Palm Springs, but it's probably the best place to be now. I really love it here, and arts and culture. I mean, everywhere.
Oh
There's
yeah.
art installations. Keep your eyes peeled on the side of the road. That's the advice because you never know when you're going to see an art installation off to the side, just right on
Yeah.
Palm Canyon.
Or they want to look it up, just look up Desert X. Desert X is going on right now too, so they can go
Yeah, oh, that's
look them.
right.
They'll have a map. Or
Yeah.
the mid-century modern architecture in Palm
Oh, that
Springs
museum. Yeah,
and the museums. I mean,
the museum.
there's a lot of great
There's
art, a lot of
just
great
you can't.
culture.
Yeah, it's a big city in a little town.
Um, Obviously the story that you've done, I'm going to get back to your film, the movie you've done, uh, it's still going on. I mean, obviously we got a new administration, and which is the old administration, and
Hmm.
these conspiracy theories still go on, and kind of there might be a continuation. Do you see yourself or you and Liz working together to continue to tell the story because it is still developing as we speak?
Yeah, we haven't really spoken about that at all. But one thing I will say is it's a continuation of the old administration, with the caveat being the career politicians are gone. And in the place of these people, or the generals, the people who have made careers of this and have the experience and potential qualifications to do it, instead, we've loaded an administration full of reality TV stars, essentially, and Fox News personalities. That should be alarming to everyone, because many of these people over the past 4 years have been helping to spread this disinformation. Um, and it's unfortunate that most Americans don't double check their sources or look for their own actual evidence, and just kind of, especially middle-aged women. I found research just recently came out showing that middle-aged women are the biggest spreaders of disinformation online. It was Twitter specifically, the study took place on, because they indiscriminately retweet, and just
Mm.
with they see a headline, it catches their attention, boom, especially if it's about kids or health or education. And so I think the lesson to learn in some of this, especially being, like I said, saying mainstream is just kind of too much of an understatement to even go. You look at our health and human services director. He has been on the conspiracy trail for the last several years. Um, it's pretty appalling to see yeah, there's definitely a sequel here somewhere about something. I just, I guess it'll all depend if we're all still free to make those films or not back at that point.
Right. Well, I think we're gonna stop it right here because there's so much to discuss, but I
Oh,
also kind
yeah.
of don't want to spoil your film. But just remind everyone to come out. It's on the 31st, right?
March
Sorry.
31st, Theater 2, 11:30 a.m.
Yeah, and there's a lot of great local content there, so people should come out and see it, meet you, and they can ask your questions about the film. I
Yeah.
think there's a lot to dig in there, and I think when we go off air, I'm going to dig in with you a little bit on some of these
Mm.
topics. But thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me today. And we look forward to watching your film on the 31st.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited that we're at AmDocs.
We're
It's like
excited to have you.
our world premiere right here in my own backyard.
And to remind everyone, American Documentary and Animation Film Festival, also known as AmDocs, is March 27th through 31st at the Palm Springs Cultural Center. Tickets are on sale now. Come on out. It's going to be a great show this year. Noelle, thank you so much, and thank you for sharing all the information. This is really a fascinating and very important piece of work. I hope everyone gets a chance to see it.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate your time.